Welcome to the Keen on Yoga podcast, bringing you the stories of many people who in various ways are attempting to walk the path of yoga. Our intention is to inspire your own practice and commitment to yoga beyond the mat and in all areas of life. We consider this an offering, a service to the community and labour of love. If you feel inclined, any donations are appreciated. Just visit our page and click the donate button at www.keenonyoga.co.uk/podcast. I hope you enjoy the show. Today's guest on the Keen on Yoga podcast is Eddie Stern. Eddie Stern learned Ashtanga Yoga under Pattabhi Jois and Sri Sharat Jois. Practicing yoga from the late 1980s and Ashtanga from around 1990, he ran an incredibly popular and well-renowned yoga school in SoHo in his native New York. It became a community hub in New York for spiritual seekers, as well as attracting many well-known names such as Madonna, Lou Reed and Gwyneth Paltrow. Along with Jocelyn, his wife, Eddie founded the Broome Street Temple, and within this space, it was Manhattan's first Vedically consecrated Ganesh Temple. Eddie, while studying Sanskrit, chanting and Vedic ritual, ran this temple alongside his duties as a yoga teacher. Eddie is somewhat of a polymath, an artist, a yoga scholar, as well as an avid student of science and modern technology. There are not really many fields that do not command his interest. He is the co-editor of Namarupa, a Hindu philosophy art journal, as well as sitting on many numerous boards and panels. However, his diversity of approach is increasingly evidenced in his more recent work as founder of the Breathing app, as well as the author of One Simple Thing, a new look at the science of yoga and how it can transform your life. This is an incredible fusion of the ancient teachings of yoga with the current advances in biological understanding. He lives with his wife and daughter in Greenwich Village, close to where he grew up. He's currently working, amongst many other things, on his second book. Welcome, Eddie, to the Keen on Yoga podcast.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for coming. Just give a brief overview of why you got it, how and why you got into yoga.
How and why?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm probably the same reasons as you and everybody else, huh? Why did you get into yoga?
Because I did a philosophy degree.
Cool. Where did you do that?
I did my first part at King's in London, and I did my second part at Warwick in the Midlands. And I was still anxious and depressed, and in fact more so than ever. You know, when I went in the end I went into the counsellor's room, and she said, "Well," I said, "I feel terrible. I'm embarrassed about being here." And she said, "Well, you and half of the philosophy, graduates are here." So then I just thought, well, I got into it for trying to understand and be happier in life, and I'm not. So if I've done all the thinking I can in my head, which I had, by the age of 16, I'd read, everything under the sun. Well, what can I do to make myself happy? And so I went to the body. I thought there's something in the body which is making me anxious and unhappy. Must be there. And there you go.
Hey, my daughter is at King's College London. She's studying classics.
Right. Classics, yeah. Well, the other thing is it's subterranean. Everything is downstairs, so you're underground all the time.
Well, I mean, in New York City, we're used to that, so I guess she's right at home. Right. But she's back in New York now, studying online. But it's funny. I knew when I was getting into yoga, I was actually dating a girl who was a philosophy student at NYU, and she also was kind of like always depressed. I mean, not necessarily depressed, but very, like pensive and like inward, but not in a way that felt kind of like healthy and flowering open. Because it's impossible to think your way out of your mind, right? And if all you're doing is try to like think through the issues all the time, you find yourself that you're at a thought problem. It's hard to think your way out of a thought problem. You have to act your way out of a thought problem. You have to act your way out. And so it was interesting to see like the distinctions or the differences between like how I was approaching it with yoga at the time and how I saw the philosophy students trying to figure it all out by like talking about it and thinking about it. Now,
they've come the other way around, haven't you? You've come the other way around because you didn't do any education in your book, it says, which is incredible. And then you've become, very kind of educated after doing the body stuff. You've gone the other way.
Yeah, but the education I have it's what Deepak Chopra calls nickel knowledge. It's stuff you can learn on the internet or you can read in a book. It's not real education what I have. It's just picking stuff up along the way and making use of it however I feel like. But what it doesn't allow me to do is it doesn't allow me to structure my learning, structure my articulation of arguments. It hasn't taught me how to be a convincing writer because, I'm just picking it up along the way and figuring it out, as I said. So I think there's some, there's great value to a structured education. And obviously you have to keep going after that and figure things more out on your own. But there's something about study habits, discipline of study, articulation of thoughts, and being challenged a lot, and to be challenged in debate is a huge part of the Hindu tradition. Like study and debate is a huge part of the Hindu tradition. It's the huge part of the Buddhist traditions as well, where you memorize texts, you learn them, you learn the meanings, and then you debate with people from opposing viewpoints so that you can maybe clarify your own or try to prove yours right? Krishnamacharya used to say, and A.G. Mohan also would echo this sentiment, that if you're a really good philosopher, you can argue your point from either side of the perspective and still be able to win. So it's just a matter of knowing what it is that you're arguing and how to get there. And then that's the sign, he would say, of a good philosopher. I always liked that. I thought that was really good. It's not really about being right. It's just proving your point.
Oh, I had a professor, Germaine Greer. Germaine Greer. Well, she was a teacher at Warwick, right? One of my professors, and she could argue anything, and she would argue both sides of the point completely convincingly. So
it's really great. It is a skill, and it is great, and it drives home that point. I know I just said it, but I'll say it again: that it's not about being right, because there is no right. It's about being convincing. It's about knowing the things so well that you can show the clarity of both perspectives. Because what are we really trying to do? Do we want to be right or do we want to understand? And so if we want to understand, then maybe we just can try to understand everything from the perspective it's coming from. And then maybe we settle in on one thing which we feel a great affinity for because it just clears the path for us. But it's not that it's right and it's not that it's the only way. It's just the one that makes us feel the best. But to still be able to argue convincingly for something else is a sharpness of the intellect. That's what I was going to say. It's a clarity of the intellect. And the sharpening of the intellect, or as they say in Sanskrit, the buddhi, that's like a key factor when it comes to yoga. Because otherwise, if we don't have the intellect sharpened, then we get lost in the field of manas, the field of mind, which are our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings and our desires and our dislikes and our memories and our traumas and all that. That becomes the reality. And then when we want to argue for something, if we argue from it from the point of the mind, where all of these different, preferences are living, then we think that our preference is the right thing and that's what we should be arguing for. But if we are sharpening our intellect, we know, okay, all that stuff which is moving about that's not the stuff. It's just superficial, but it's not important. But I'm going to go to this layer deeper and examine from the layer deeper. And then you can really sharpen yourself on these different points, like the 6 orthodox schools of Hinduism, the Shatdarshans, etc. And then the sharpening of the intellect leads to the discernment from what is changing and what isn't changing. And that's where yoga begins to occur, the first stages, like from that discernment and separating off. Here's the witness, here's the awareness, and here's all the stuff in nature which is changing. And I need my intellect sharp and clear in order to make that discernment, or it doesn't happen. I just identify with the stuff in the mind.
Did you always, I don't think you always had that viewpoint. When you started yoga, I think you started, or at least you started looking at yoga books. I think I've read or saw in an interview that you were quite young and, you're just figuring out and just kind of as almost a teenager, right? And just like everyone else, you kind of just trying to figure out where you stood in life, what the purpose of life was, where you fitted in. What point did it take over after practice? Because then you went to Mysore, then you did all the Mysore stuff, and became very developed at yoga. At what point was this thread throughout? Was this wish for discernment and wish for understanding throughout, or did it go in fluctuations? I mean, for example, my path on it was very much devout and very much in a Socratic method, and then I got very much sidetracked with the gymnastics of Ashtanga Yoga, being like most other people, insecure adult, and in Mysore, good at it, and then went down a complete rabbit hole with gymnastics for 10 years. It's only almost now that I'm merging and getting back into what I originally started 25 years ago.
What do you mean gymnastics, a rabbit hole of gymnastics?
Well, it's not to say it maybe didn't do something, but I think I got overly fixated on the postures,
Mm-hmm. Doing the postures well, learning more postures.
Doing the postures well. I mean, well is perhaps a debatable term. I think that I used them because I could do them, but I don't think I had any sthita here or, sukha in them. I think I just used them to kind of stir up my nervous system, assuming that was wanted, right? Like, I don't feel I felt calmer. I felt more stirred up and more confused, perhaps, by the deep advanced twists and the leg behind the heads and all the, the advanced B series.
Yeah. So basically doing the difficult asanas was enhancing the sensory experiences that you had of your nervous system. By sensory, I mean the sensations, the feelings that you were getting. And then that intensity of feeling from the postures was what you were identifying with as a spiritual experience or as a yoga practice. Yeah. And so basically it's the signaling from the nervous system, spitting out whatever it spits out. You can call them hormones or, endorphins, whatever the names here don't matter. And then we identify or misidentify with that sensation, like as a euphoria or as a feeling of great energy or whatever. But really all it is a nervous system amping itself up from stimulation. But it's not a terrible stimulation. It's an inner stimulation that we're doing. It's not like, we're freebasing, crack cocaine or something. It's, so, but I think this is a natural part of a yoga journey for many, many people. That there, we have outward stimulation, right, that we identify with is what should I achieve in the world? What am I supposed to be? And then we move to yoga, and then there's an inner stimulation. And at first it's very what we would call spiritual, it's very eye-opening and life-changing. And then maybe a plateau hits. And then the idea of seeking experience in the realm of feelings, comes back into play. So we do harder practices and deeper practices. We want to learn more because we need more stimulation because we're not grounded in quiet yet. And this happens to a lot of people. So just generally speaking, not everybody. And then what can happen is we can mistake that that inner stimulation of what we're calling here the nervous system as our spiritual experience. And we get swept away by it. And we just keep going and going and going. It's a river that carries us. We jump into the current. And then at a certain point, like the current starts to slow itself down. Like maybe there was something that needed to be burned out or worked on or just smoothed out a little bit for a while, for a decade, for 2 decades. And then as it begins to smooth itself down, then all of a sudden, again, there's that inward turn of awareness going, okay, I was going through this thing for a while, but now I'm feeling it a little bit different. And you readjust and it's just part of it. And what can happen is we can go, oh, I went off track. And, but maybe that was our track, maybe that was the only track we needed to be in so we could arrive at this next place. And this next place we're only going to be there temporarily also until we go on to the next thing. So, I think it's a phase of our lives that we should be non-judgmental about, not to say, oh, I totally lost the thread. We probably did lose the thread, but now I'm just talking off the top of my head. So we might have now I have, what I've been thinking about lately is that maybe one of the reasons so many Westerners quote unquote lose the thread. And that happens to us because we haven't really had a good foundational training in the Hindu thought systems and the Hindu philosophies and in all the different yoga systems. So our perspective is not really steady yet. And so then there's going to be a lot more variables. So I really feel these days that, especially with all the conversations about cultural appropriation, which I, for the most part, agree with, we need to keep remembering as yoga teachers to study the Hindu traditions, to study the yogic texts, and to always keep grounded in their perspective, and not try to have our own understanding necessarily of it yet, but to understand what the traditions held and what the traditions thought was important. For example, the 4 aims of life, for example. That's a foundational thing that probably any serious yoga student should really know about. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Because so many of the practices are framed in the 4 aims of life. So if we don't understand that framing, then what are we doing?
I think it's exactly it. We've got a practice, but we haven't got any context whatsoever, right? I mean, even when you go to Mysore, you kind of see like any person is doing, they're doing puja in the morning, and then, they're making the rangolis on the doorstep, and then, even if they're not philosophical, they've got a whole kind of context of practice with it, they can kind of fit the yoga into, right? And when it becomes detached, I think it's just kind of gone wild.
Correct. When it becomes detached, all it becomes is a practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your reflections, I mean, I don't want to be prying, but what do you think back now and looking back at that experience? And obviously you were teaching Mysore for 20 years, and I believe that you've mentioned you were doing Hatha Yoga now, not Ashtanga. What are your reflections back on the Ashtanga period? Do you have any?
Well, I mean, I'll just tell you one quick thing. I remember I was 18 years old, and I was living in my first apartment on Cornelia Street in Greenwich Village, just 2 blocks away from where I grew up. And I had been on a spiritual quest without having any context or support for that quest for some time. It was spurred on by my 9th grade English teacher and Mrs. Benditson, Jane Benditson. And I remember lying there, and I was just very kind of in touch with with my awareness state, just awareness, and I was thinking about personality and identity. And I was thinking to myself, the awareness that I'm experiencing now as me is going to be the exact same awareness I experience when I'm 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, that I'm always going to be the same awareness. Maybe I'll look different or dress different or listen to different music, but I'm always going to be this. This is always going to be me, or the I feeling of me. And it has been, because though my interests have changed and though, my age has changed, I remember that very, very clearly. I remember the feeling of that very clearly. It wasn't enlightenment. It wasn't samadhi. It was nothing. It was nothing more special than anyone who just pays attention would naturally come across. And people have been spontaneously thinking those things since there's been people, probably. So that's been the thing for me. That's been the thing. And so I did a lot of yoga before I got to Mysore. And I had done a lot of different practices that were very important to me. Then I got to Mysore in 1991, started practicing. That's where I met Pattabhi Jois in India. And I wanted to learn what he had to teach. And so I stuck with that system for a long time. And I continue to think it's a very good system, of course. And I still continue to teach it. I don't practice all of it anymore. And this is only recently during the pandemic, but I practiced it with joy and conviction up until the time of the pandemic. Right, and then over the past half year or so, I've started rediscovering practices that I used to do when I first began doing yoga when I was 19, 20, 21, and enjoying them a lot again, and finding the things that I'm looking for from a yoga practice. And so, like everybody, there were times, well, not necessarily everyone, but like a lot of people, sometimes you do a practice or you do something because you think you're supposed to. Think, oh, this is what, this is what's expected of you, and but sometimes that expectation of what you think an ideology holds out isn't the thing which gives you meaning. There's something in there, of course, there's something to learn, but maybe it's not the thing that completely fulfills your purpose or meaning in your own life. And therefore, you don't attack the methodology or the thinking system. You decide, okay, what is it that is going to continue to connect me deeper to meaning and purpose? And in regards to yoga, we should always question, like, okay, now on the one hand, study what does the yoga tradition hold, and then on the other hand, understand, okay, well, what does yoga mean to me? Like when I'm practicing, what does it actually mean to me? How do I want to feel when I'm done with my practice every day? What do I want my state of mind and my state of my body to be in when I'm done? How are these things affecting me energetically for the good? What can I take from the past 30 years of learning and begin to apply it in different ways so that it has a overall positive beneficial effect? And that if I look into the future, if I look 30 years from now, I'd still like to be practicing yoga like Krishnamacharya was when he was in his 80s and 90s. Or Mr. Iyengar, who continued, although I've never done really Iyengar yoga. So I'll just look at the Krishnamacharya side of things. Yes, I would like to be mobile when I'm in my 80s and 90s. I'd like to be able to, walk around, get out of bed in the morning, cook a meal, do my laundry, all that stuff, I'd like to navigate whatever the new technology is. Maybe we don't have computers anymore. And so I'm playing the long game, and I've been playing the long game for a while. And for me, the long game does not include doing advanced practices anymore, right? Because they make me tired. I got a lot of shit to do. I'm busy. So aside from teaching every day, there's a bunch of different things I'm involved with. And sure. I want my energy for those. And if I do intensive practice every day, I start to get tired. That's just me. That's not everyone. So what I'm trying not to do is, in fact, what I'm not doing is I'm not assuming that my experience is everyone else's experience. And that's a mistake that teachers sometimes make. They go, this is my experience of it, so it needs to be everyone's experience. So I'm gonna make these demands of my students. But no, you can remember that at a certain point, my experiences of certain types of practices were very positive. And even if I might not be teaching those, practicing those right now, they're still in me. They're still part of the process of who we become. And so it will be useful for someone else. It might be useful for someone who has more facility in their bodies than I do right now. So I can continue to teach them. And I can also continue to teach the things that I'm also presently doing that have a lot of meaning for me. So that's kind of, where I'm at. Yeah. Even though I don't like to, belabor the point of talking about that stuff. You get the idea.
That's good. I feel one thing is with the Ashtanga being so dynamic is, as a young guy, it really keeps you on the straight and narrow. It's like if you've got a lot of energy to burn, where it's like better to put your energy into something which is, hopefully not too harmful than what I would have done with that energy otherwise, right? And that's one thing I thought about the practice. Another thing is I wonder, at a certain point, whether it's too fast paced. At a certain point, would one want to slow down? I mean, when you're talking about getting different things out of practice now, or looking for different things, and you talk in your book about asana and vinyasa and sthiti. And I'm asking a couple of different questions here. Would your vinyasa still have sthiti in it? Oh, sorry. Would your practice still have vinyasa in it?
Well, Yeah, what I take to be vinyasa is the linking of breath and movement together, one breath and one movement. And so anytime you move into a pose or move out from a pose, you're going to come into that pose on an inhale or an exhale. But I'm not necessarily, counting those like they're counted in Ashtanga Yoga. Okay, in terms of pace, it seems that the Ashtanga Yoga practice works very well at a medium pace. At a slow pace, it becomes something else. At a fast pace, your mind spins out. But if you keep like a medium pace, like the steady rhythm to it, it seems to have a very, very good effect. It can have a grounding effect if you don't go too fast. It can have an ungrounding effect if you go too fast. If you go very slow with it, it becomes something else. You can become maybe tired, or you can become, the energy won't start to move in the same way. So it just seems that like this particular formulation moves well at a medium pace, at a steady pace. That's just one of the things I noticed from over the years. And I think that there are other practices that work well in a very slow pace. And then other practices like the stuff that we're doing a course right now with a guy named Ricky Warren from London, who's doing a course on the similar physical positions of yoga, Kalari, and Kushti. Kushti is Hindu wrestling. Kalari, of course, is a South Indian martial art. A lot of similar positions, and a lot of those are done pretty quickly. You do them really briskly. And then they have sort of a different type of cardiovascular effect. And one of the things I talked about this the other day online, where or on the Instagram, where you can find some of these poses in Kalari or in the Kushti, and they're done very briskly, but when you hold them static, they become yoga asanas. So you can do something in a static way, it becomes an asana. You can do something in a dynamic way. Maybe it becomes something you see in another tradition, which is a physical tradition, but still has a deep spiritual and or religious basis to it. That to me is really interesting, that you can use the same thing in different ways and get different outcomes. Because you know what? Obviously, at different times in our lives, we look for different outcomes. And different people who come to us as students, they're going to have different needs as well. So to know a little bit like how to modify things, if it needs to be modified, can be an interesting education for, well, I'm not going to say us, but I'll say for me, I like it. I think it's cool and interesting. And it broadens and expands the idea of the yoga tradition, Actually, the yoga tradition developed in the midst of a massive dialogue of viewpoints of people who were seeking reality or who had found reality and were elucidating it in different ways. And yoga was part of that conversation. So it's, why not eavesdrop a little on what the other people are saying and broaden our vision? Doesn't mean we have to do everything. We can still be really focused and really disciplined and choose one practice and that's great, and one guru, and that's great. But at the same time, we can learn, we can be open, we can see, this was maybe influenced by, this philosopher in the 10th century, interesting. That adds value to my life.
What about the idea of the asanas having a particular kind of energetic quality to them? I mean, how much credence do you give to that? Do you pick certain groups of asanas to give a particular energetic effect? Can you do that, or are they just more generally regulating? And within the context of yoga method being Patanjalian to some degrees, i.e. for clarity or concentration of mind.
All right. So what do you think on that?
I'm probably to the latter, to be honest. The more I go on, the less I kind of think mystically, and probably the more I'm pragmatically. They give a stability of concentration, and you want to feel vibrant in the body, and that's going to give you a general sense of vitality and optimism in your outlook. And you're going to be interested to study more and question more because your body feels better, and you're more like everyone knows you sit on the sofa and watch Netflix for 2 hours and you don't feel like doing anything after that, So, I think physically you could probably do a lot of types of training, but would you stick in it? The thing is, yoga is quite sticky. I never stuck at gym, for example. And also gym is kind of stimulating in a way that yoga is kind of different, and then they give the basic kind of enlivening. And then you're still as well. And then what do you do with that stillness? Then you're inevitably, sooner or later, you start to question, So it's indicative of a certain perspective of consciousness. But I don't necessarily think that they're kind of this energetic kundalini kind of stirring, that you'll just do the postures and don't think about it at all and something will happen to you out there, and that's definitely within the Ashtanga kind of stream, certain threads of it, right? Like just do it and don't think and some mystical thing will happen in your head. No, you have to question it as well. It's a starting point, only a starting point. There you go.
So you think basically globally speaking, asanas are good and they have a positive effect?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah. in the most general sense, yeah. Yeah. If you're not doing them sensibly, if you're being kind of crushed into them because you've got to do lotus to progress to the next posture, then that's ridiculous. And obviously you have to be sensible about them, and you would take that as a given, but we can't take that as a given apparently. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that globally also asanas generally speaking are good. I agree. I also think that different postures have different effects.
Right.
And we can see this in the Hatha Yoga texts where they describe a benefit. And if a benefit is ascribed to an asana, that means that it was taught and discovered for a particular reason. And with the exception of the seated asanas, which are used primarily for meditation, when we look to the wide range of asanas outside of the simple, pure meditative asanas, those seem to have different types of effects on the nervous system. And therefore, okay, so let's just look at it this way. Now, again, I'm just talking because we're hanging out, having a conversation. Let's just, anyone listening in, just pretend that Adam and I are like at a coffee shop and we're just talking.
That's the idea. Yeah.
We're just talking trash about whatever comes into our mind. If you take something, if you look at the way that the nervous system operates, or the way that it's formed, as we have a central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is all the nerves outside of the spinal cord. There are certain compressions that are going to stimulate the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is coming out from the area of the lower lumbar and the sacrum and up above the cervical into the brainstem area. Okay. So anything which is going to be moving forward is going to be relaxing and calming for the parasympathetic nervous system, and also, therefore, for the sympathetic. Now, let's look at the sympathetic nervous system as being the autonomic branch of our nervous system that moves us towards cellular repair, restoration, the absorption of nourishment like digestion, and the healing and cleansing activities of sleep. Okay, so the parasympathetic nervous system does a lot of stuff. It's connected with our exhalation. It's connected with contractive movements largely, including, like our sympathetic stimulation of the eyes, which is happening all through the day. The retinas will dilate, and then parasympathetic is contraction. So anything which is going to be a contractive type of a movement is in association with the parasympathetic activities, because it has activities. And these are going to be cellular repair, restoration, digestion, and sleep and rest. And all these are either nourishing or reparative, especially sleep. And then our sympathetic is anything that moves us towards activity. Anything which is an expansive movement, like an inhalation or a widening of the eyes, and when there's a lot of, if there's environmental demand, it will be the release of an excess of stress hormones, which will move us into the fight or flight state that people talk about when they talk about the sympathetic nervous system. That is an extreme expression of it. So these are complementary branches of the automatic things that make us go. A back bend, for example, is going to stimulate the sympathetic nerves that are coming out in the mid portion of the spine, from right at the lower cervical down to about third or fourth of the lumbar. So to squeeze those and extend those back is going to put an excitable pressure rather than a relaxing pressure on those sympathetic nerves. So it's going to be stimulating. So for relaxation, you're going to have forward movements, whether it's a child's pose or Paschimottanasana. And for movements that are going to stimulate and give energy to the nervous system, any type of a back bend, a Shalabhasana to a Dhanurasana to a you name it, doesn't matter. That's one of the reasons why you find that for students of yours or in Ashtanga Yoga who are starting intermediate or getting through the first half of intermediate, sometimes they have a hard time sleeping because they spent a long time relaxing the nervous system with forward bending asanas. And now all of a sudden there's a lot of emphasis into the sympathetic nerve chain in the back of the spine, which is excitable. Even putting your leg behind your head, what that's doing is once you get the leg behind the head, you have to use your middle back muscles to hold your leg in place. So it's not really a hip opening thing, but it's a test of your strength of the back. And so just the action of lifting your back up to keep your neck in place to hold the leg back is also excitable for the sympathetic ganglion. So
I found that with leg behind the head for sure. Stimulation, very stimulating.
And fun. No doubt.
Yeah, it is fun. Yeah, having said that, you set me a trap there because I remember the second half of your book is all about the effects of the nervous system. Obviously, very strongly, in belief of the energy of the posture. And it is very interesting. I'm not sure if I go completely down that track on it.
Can I interrupt you for 1 minute? I want to interrupt you for 1 minute. I want to say one other thing. This is a general formula. A forward bend is relaxing. A backward bend is energizing. A twist is grounding, because what a twist does to the movement of the information flows in the spine and in the brain balances the information flows in the corpus callosum, connecting the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So a forward bend is calming, a backward bend is energizing, and a twist is grounding. And I'm not looking at these things in terms of energy or the energetic quality. I'm looking about information processing. Our nervous system is sending signals all through the day. And we respond to those signals after they happen with a thought, with an idea about that signal. A car comes shooting down the street and you jump out of the way. You jump out of the way without having thought about it. Your nervous system somehow has sensed it and has caused your body to move out of danger's way, moved out of harm's way. After that happens, and in that happening, your heart speeds up, the adrenals shoot out adrenaline, maybe some cortisol, and all that, the speeding up, the heating up of the body, you jump out of the way. And then after that, you think, oh my God, that was so scary. You don't think, holy shit, this is so scary, I got to jump out of the way. You jump first, you think after. So thought is at the end of the chain of physiological response. And so what's happening is communication, information flows, messages being sent. And all of this is happening every single second of our existence. And then we interpret some of those messages as a thought, as a feeling, as an emotion, as an idea that we then cling to. But what we're trying to do in the practice of asanas is let this thinking level settle down and settle into the level of information flows. And if we listen to the information flows and we feel them, then we can have a better idea of what they're actually doing on different levels and understand how we can be in harmony with those information flows. Now, not being in harmony with an information flow not being in harmony with a signal would mean that my body is telling me something, but I'm ignoring what it says because I have an idea that I want to do more, that I want to go further, that I'm not there yet. Where the body might be sending messages throughout the whole different physiological systems, including the nervous system, saying, you're good right here. Stop, pause, let it settle in. So this whole mechanism can adjust. But the mind says, do a little more, go a little faster, go a little harder, reach a little further. Then something bad happens. So attunement, this is interoception, being able to listen to the messages of what the body is saying. It's a very, very, very important aspect of doing asanas. And then you can say, this is like what this asana seems to be doing. It's sending more information flow in this area. And then if you want to call it an energetic thing, call it energy. That's fine. But what we don't want to do, or what I don't want to do, is I don't want to call something energetic, but not well define what energy is. Because then we become loosey-goosey with language. We start using words that we don't really know what they mean. And then they can mean anything. And if a word can mean anything, then you can say anything that you want and with no repercussions, and you can say anything you want and have other people, try to convince other people that whatever you say, they should believe because, you've said it. And this is what happens in the yoga world when we don't have a lot of training. We make assumptions about things and we say them to our students, but we don't have a lot of real education for what might be happening. So I think about this. I think about that a lot.
There's a lot of questions that come up there. I mean, a lot of interesting points. One of them is, you mentioned that that it's very much, and reading your book, I think in a lot of ways that the yoga is very much used in a practical way to in the world, right? To be calmer, to be kinder, to be like a better human in the world, so of the world, immanent. But then there's this thing that, it's clear in the text of the Bhagavad Gita, everywhere in yoga, you have this rather transcendent idea that, you have the reincarnation, you have that yoga is taking one out of the world, the point of denaturing oneself. And you mentioned that, I think, at one point as well, that yoga is an irregulating thing, that it takes you out of the wish for procreation. It takes you out of the wish for, carrying on the whole
it
chain.
Can. Mm-hmm.
Right.
It can. It doesn't need to.
Ought it to? Or what are we, are we using it for the world or for something else to take us out of the world? Or can we do the both together?
It depends on what tradition you're following. So if you are following strict yoga, Patanjali yoga, and you have faith in the system of Sankhya, then Sankhya says there are two eternal principles. One is awareness or witness consciousness called Purusha, and another is nature or Prakriti. And they always exist side by side. Nature causes everything to exist, and consciousness observes it, but it doesn't cause it to happen. And in the Advaita Vedanta tradition, everything is Brahman, and everything which is created has been created from within Brahman as the efficient and material cause. But in Sankhya, efficient and material cause are two separate things. What we have in a Sankhya perspective is that there is resolution of identity. And that's basically what happens. So you're not necessarily escaping from the world in a renunciate type of a way. What you're doing is you're seeing the true nature of the world that then causes you to not identify with the changing modes of nature anymore, and only have your identity filled with awareness, with witness consciousness, with Purusha, with pure being. And that's called Kaivalya. And that is the aloneness or isolation of awareness from everything which changes. So what happens, from my understanding, once Kaivalya occurs to any of the infinite Purushas, The world does not cease to be. The world continues. Nature continues, but you don't identify with it anymore. And this is where you could perhaps say, you could apply a statement like, be in the world, but not of it. Something like that. Because at the point of Kaivalya, even though you have total liberation, other people don't. And the world continues to exist. And you might still be alive. Therefore, if you still happen to be alive, the world also exists for you, but you don't identify your entirety of your being with it, like I'm doing right now in this moment, identifying with my name and my life and my wife and my daughter and my parents and my friends and this microphone and a computer and all that stuff, So from a yoga perspective, Kaivalya is this distinction between what never changes, what always is existence, and what's always changing within existence. And those are the two things. I'm very partial to the Sankhya philosophy.
Right.
I like it.
So, as per se your book, can you give a brief overview of what your feelings of yoga method and yoga aim are?
Well,
the essence of method and the essence of it. Because also, talking to, say, Edwin Bryant, it occurred that I was talking of a different. It occurred on talking with Edwin a lot. Edwin Bryant, he's a Bhakti yogi, that he's actually wanting something very different. He's not wanting resolution. He wants duality. He wants a constant duality between him and Krishna, so he can continue worshiping Krishna forever. But people are very surprised when I've been writing this recently on, everywhere, because they're assuming, we only know Patanjali generally, and certainly in the kind of yoga Ashtanga world, this is the guy, isn't he? And that is something very different. That's just cessation, really.
Well, here's the thing. One of many things. Patanjali Yoga is a dualistic system. It's not a non-dualistic system. The Advaita Vedanta is dualistic, but there are different types of Vedanta. And the one that Edwin follows, and by the way, Edwin, as you know, I don't need to say this, is an amazing scholar. He's brilliant and a wonderful human being. I believe he follows the Vishishtadvaita, which is a qualified non-dualism, which is that all is one, but the world is really the body of Vishnu. And the highest ideal for the devotee is to be in an eternal relationship worshiping Lord Krishna. Or worshiping Vishnu. And Ramanuja had a wonderful book on Ashtanga Yoga. So this is Ramanuja Acharya has this particular Vishishtadvaita, and Madhvacharya has a different type of Vedanta. And then the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who Edwin follows, is a slightly different type of Vedanta, but it's very much linked to Ramanuja. It's the same basic stream. But again, there are going to be some differences. And Ramanuja wrote one of my favorite books on Ashtanga Yoga, but it's not Ashtanga Yoga because he only accepts the first 7 limbs. He doesn't accept Samadhi, because in Samadhi, according to Patanjali, the object of meditation shines forth in the field of consciousness so much that the meditator disappears. There's no one meditating anymore. There's just the object, which might be Purusha, or it might, usually it's not Purusha. It might be some other fine-tuned thing. And so that's all that remains. The meditator is no longer there. And for a Vaishnav, this is not desirable. They don't want to disappear. They want to be in the eternal service of Lord Krishna or one of the forms of Vishnu. And so Ramanuja took the first 7 limbs of yoga, and he said, all of these are wonderful tools of devotion, including asana and pranayama. These are great tools for developing bhakti. And that's the ideal, to develop bhakti, but not to disappear. And so he didn't accept samadhi. So it's interesting to see how these limbs of Patanjali's yoga that also existed before the time of Patanjali are used in different ways by different acharyas over many millennia in India to give a presentation which fulfills the heartfelt desires of the devotees in different ways. So you find the tattvas of Sankhya, the 5 elements, the tanmatras, the 5 organs of action, even ideas of buddhi and mahat and manas and things like that. Those are used in Vedanta, and they're used in different strains of Vedanta. They're used in yoga, they're used in Sankhya, but they're used in slightly different ways in each of those. And so one of the things which is also not desirable for the bhakti yogis in regards to yoga is that Patanjali accepts Ishvara, the Lord, a special type of being, untouched by any imperfections, untouched by karma, different than Purusha, different than Prakriti, a special type of being. To call Purusha God or the Lord is not the right, really, description, but it's a divine presence. And Patanjali suggests that Ishvara and the surrender to Ishvara will result in the perfection of samadhi. And so, but in the bhakti traditions, the best relationship with Ishvara is only to worship the divine and to be in that eternal relationship with your beloved. And so the only result of bhakti, of a relationship with Ishvara, is for the purpose of bhakti alone, for the sake of developing devotion and surrender alone. And that's all, to be in that presence. But Patanjali says, if you want to perfect samadhi, then Ishvara pranidhana is the thing to practice. And for the inward movement of your awareness and for the removal of the obstructions to the field of knowing, then Ishvara pranidhana. So Patanjali uses Ishvara in a slightly different way, and a radically different way than will be used in the Vaishnava traditions and also within the Vedanta traditions. So that's why when we use these terms, we also have to talk about, well, what tradition are we speaking in regards to? Because the terms are not always globally accepted. Now, there's one thing about the definition of yoga, and I've asked a few scholars, some Hindu scholars who I learned from in India, what they think about this. And they have not agreed with me on it, but I still think I'm right.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
So, yeah. But I think it's a basic thing, and I think it's okay that Patanjali said that yoga is the nirodha of the vrittis in the field of chitta. It is the stilling or selective elimination of the activities, vrittis, in the field of chitta, the permutations that can occur of consciousness, or the stilling of the thoughts in the mind, or the ability to rest your awareness on one thing to the exclusion of all other things. I think that this is a fundamental principle of all practices. And so no matter what kind of yoga it is, whether you're doing bhakti yoga, or you're doing jnana yoga, or karma yoga, or if you're doing tantra, or Kashmiri Shaivism, or kriya yoga, anything, you need to be able to rest your awareness on one thing with unwavering attention. That seems to be globally true for all of the practices under the heading of yoga. So I think this is what they have in connection, and why Patanjali's viewpoint has been so important as a connector, if not in all the different ways, but in this one fundamental way, that if we are not able to rest our attention or awareness in one place in a deliberate manner to the exclusion of any other activity, then we're not able to really, truly do yoga. And if you are doing that, no matter what tradition you're in, then you are doing yoga, although the outcome of that yoga might be slightly different. Devotion, liberation, kaivalya, whatever the things are. So that's kind of my thinking on it currently. And my thinking currently might change in 10 years. If you still have your podcast 10 years from now, we can do this again and decide whether or not everything I just said was hogwash. But so
I like something, just a slight segue.
I didn't answer your question, by the way.
No, you did. You did ask some of it. We asked about method and aim, and the method is clear. The aim, we don't even know the aim unless we know the aim, and then if we understand the aim, then really there's nothing to say, really.
Good. Okay. Hold on. Yeah. Stop there for a minute. Wait on that point. You have to understand the aim. This is absolutely true. And there are 3 words that encapsulate this. And these are the sadhaka, sadhana, and sadhya. And the sadhaka is the person who is questioning. That's you and me and everybody else. So we're the sadhakas. We are questioning. We wonder. And then we have a sadhana. That's a means of answering our questions or of letting our questions fall away because something better takes its place. The sadhana is going to be in line with the question. And then the sadhya is the result of that. It's the point that we reach. It's the quote unquote goal or the place we want to arrive rather than a goal. So there's the sadhaka, the questioner, the sadhana, the means, and the sadhya, the point of arrival, of understanding or of liberation. So say the thing that we're questioning is an existential thing. Who am I? What is creation? Where is the universe? Why are we here? Why did this creation happen? Who is the one which is questioning? These are all the kind of existential questions that we have, that people have had for thousands of years. Okay, so then that's the needs of that particular sadhaka. And then the sadhana might be jnana yoga. Okay, so now I'm going to do the sadhana of questioning who am I, of studying texts, of listening to teachers, and reflecting on what they say. And then the sadhya of that will be the full, complete knowledge of who I am. Okay, so I'm questioning who am I, what is all this? And then my sadhana is in line with jnana yoga, and the sadhya is a complete and full knowing of who I am. Now, maybe my problem is that I am filled with selfish desires. Like I only think about me. I'm only concerned with myself. I only want my own fulfillment. I don't think of other people, and I know it's a problem. It doesn't make me happy. And I recognize my selfishness. So that's the sadhaka. And then I question, how can I not be so selfish? So then the sadhana will then be karma yoga, of the giving of myself without the expectation of return. So I do service in any different types of way. Maybe I work at a soup kitchen, or maybe I start donating money, or maybe I start volunteering my time here or there, or maybe I start thinking of others before I think of myself, simply like that. And then the sadhya, the result of that is my desire for fulfilling myself turns into a desire for knowing the divinity in all people and recognizing that. And that my life becomes one of service and devotion without expectation of any rewards. And therefore, all my selfish desires have been transmuted into a much higher desire, which is that all beings may be happy because we all suffer to the same or lesser extents. Okay, so, and then you can do the same with Raja Yoga, you can do the same with Bhakti Yoga, you can do the same with all the yogas. And so the sadhaka, the questions that we have in particular are related to our adhikara, our eligibility. The qualifications we have are going to determine the sadhana we do, which will lead to a particular outcome, which will be the fulfillment of our being. And so, yes, to know where we're going is part of why we practice. And if we practice something without knowing where we're going, maybe we don't arrive. Maybe we get lost. Maybe we go, I know I want to do this thing. I jump on this train and I just go. I don't care where it's going. Wherever I end up, it's going to be fine. But maybe some places, you end up, you might not get there because you don't know where you're going. You get somewhere else, you learn something, but you might not get to what the thing promises. So with Raja Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, the fulfillment is in stillness. And so that is the promise of Raja Yoga, absolute total stillness, so that all of the troubles of the mind have absorbed themselves back into an equilibrium. And then again, there is a knowing of oneself, and it's the method of stillness. And so we use asanas and pranayamas and all of the other limbs to always move towards stillness. And in that stillness, pure being reflects in the field of our chitta, and that becomes our understanding or our self-knowing. And if there's not stillness, then the mind does not become a fit receptacle to reflect reality or nature. So that's Ashtanga Yoga.
You've done it there. That's a full qualification of our point. Yeah, no, it's nice. Okay. And you provided the little link into my last question as well. So I heard you talking about the role of the teacher, that we have this model, the guru-shishya relationship, and you said it's not appropriate for as it's been transmuted in the West, it doesn't really seem to produce the goods, as it were. So what's the role of a teacher then?
Okay, so
I suppose we're talking about asanas. I'm a yoga teacher. You're an asana teacher. But people are going to ask you for all kinds of things, right? Okay. And they're going to ask you to take care of them, guide them.
I get you. So first of all, the guru tradition is part of the Hindu culture. It's part of Buddhist culture as well. It's part of the all the different things that arose from India. The guru tradition is part of that. And it's very much a cultural thing, and it's hard for a Westerner to understand what that relationship is. Some people can do it, but not everybody. And so I think it's absolutely fine for Westerners to have gurus. And in India, I don't think most people will ever really fully understand that relationship. But what I don't think is okay is I don't think it's okay for Westerners to think that they can be gurus, because that's not our cultural tradition. Now, there are going to be some Westerners who are brought up they were raised in Gurukul type conditions, like in the Hare Krishna movement. And so within that movement, if they have a process of turning or of Westerners becoming guru-like figures, like, I'm not judging or criticizing that at all. It will work within their context. But from what I've observed over the years, and this is just my observation, is that in the West, it doesn't work because it's not part of our cultural tradition, and because we don't understand what that relationship really is. I think over here, it's better for us to be spiritual friends, to know that we're like all on this path together, and maybe some are a little bit further forward, and we can seek out mentorship and friendship. And that's a pretty good relationship for us, because yoga is not from our culture either. We're practicing something which doesn't come from where we're from, but we're adopting our lifestyles to it. But we can only do so at a superficial level. We can't do it at a level like a cellular level or a level of our genes. We're not born into it. We're born over here. We're going to understand it differently. And so we need to engage with it, I feel. And people, of course, are free to prove me wrong or disagree with me or whatever. But this is my feeling, is that there's so many problems in the yoga world that we would be better off all thinking about our relationship as spiritual friends or mentors or something like that, and leave the hierarchies of the guru-shishya tradition to people whose culture it forms a part of. From my understanding, from the studies I've done of into the guru tradition, particularly from the teachings of the last Acharya of Kanchipuram, the Chandra Shekharendra Bharati, who wrote a wonderful book called The Guru Tradition, which is it's a little bit dry, but it really elucidated a lot of things from the guru tradition of the Hindu culture, was that the guru is not really the body. The guru is the knowledge and the teachings and the experience which is going to be transmitted through a person. And what we do is we have gratitude and respect for the knowledge that we have learned. And for that, we are always grateful and always respectful. But any embodied being is going to have problems associated with them because they have taken on a human form. Some of those problems might be greater, some of them might be lesser. So, for example, with Pattabhi Jois, we've seen that some of the behavior that he engaged in was extremely painful for many, many people. And the sexual abuses have left a lasting imprint on this tradition that might take some time to recover from, if ever. But the pain that was caused, I don't believe, should be forgotten. That shouldn't be pushed under the carpet, because pain is pain. We can maybe at a certain point, people, if they choose to, can find their own resolution. But that's not what I'm saying here or what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about here is that what do you do if you have a guru who did really harmful things to women and to other people as well? How do you manage that? And we are in the Ashtanga Yoga world are not alone in this problem. This has occurred to many teachers and many gurus. It occurs in the church. It occurs in synagogues. It occurs in schools. It occurs in politics. It occurs in sports. At any level, there seem to be really bad guys who sexually abuse people. It's like a problem of humanity, or of men in particular, and to a very lesser extent to women. Very lesser extent. So if we look for guidance from within the Hindu tradition on this, one of the suggestions is always be grateful for what you have learned. That's it. You don't have to forgive a person for their bad actions. You definitely should not excuse the bad actions. But what do you do with the information? What do you do with the knowledge? You're appreciative for it. I'm still teaching anyone who, let me just back this up. I don't want to say anyone. That's never a good way to start a sentence. I still am teaching Ashtanga Yoga, even though I am still in conflict about Pattabhi Jois. That's just a fact, I still am. But I'm still grateful for what my life is right now. And but I don't excuse his behavior. I make no defenses for him whatsoever. And at the same time, I'm grateful for the knowledge. I'm grateful for what I've been able to do with that. And I'm appreciative for what I've been able to benefit from that. And I'm appreciative of how I've been able to share with that. And so, therefore, the Guru tradition can be complicated when it comes down to a human level. But what if it isn't at a human level? Because if you look to the texts and you look to the ancient stories in the Puranas, many of the rishis and many of the yogis were complicated figures and did things which by any human standard or any moral standard would not be considered okay. And yet those teachings still exist. So now the only problem with talking in this way is that people might feel that their pain is not being acknowledged. Okay, and so I think that philosophizing about the Guru tradition can become dangerous because it's important to acknowledge people's pain and that, yes, this happened to you. And yes, if I, for example, was not able to be there for someone the way they needed to be, then I'm sorry about that. And I wish that I could have been. So all of these acknowledgements, need to be had and made and thought about. So on a personal human level, that's my feeling. Really painful things really happened. And then on another level, I believe that the Guru tradition and the way that knowledge is passed down and has been passed down in India is very valuable and is an important institution. But then I also feel that institution does not translate very well to America. I don't know about Europe, but I'm going to talk about America because that's where I live I'm going to include North America and Canada in that. There are certain aspects of it that really haven't gone well. And some of it has to do with, am I going on too long about this, Adam? You're cool with all this?
It's good. Okay. Yeah. No, a few minutes more. The last question. And just
all right. So I'll say one other thing. I'll say one other thing about it. That and again, I could be very wrong about this, but it's just something that I question. That, as Westerners, a lot of us read books like Autobiography of a Yogi, and we read all the Ramana Maharshi books and the Neem Karoli Baba books, and we wanted, and Muktananda and Nityananda and all those, and Ananda Mayama and all the gurus who were performing miracles and, bestowing liberation on people and all that stuff. And a lot of us wanted that. We were looking for that. And we superimpose that stuff on teachers like Pattabhi Jois. We superimpose our desires for what we want them to be on top of them, and they might not really be that person. And so when we force that on them, then that changes them sometimes also. It's like believing your own press, If all of a sudden people start talking about you positively because you've done something, and then people start really praising you, and you start believing that praise, and then you start looking for that praise. And then if you don't get that praise, maybe you get upset or you act out in a certain way. I'm not talking about acting out with sexual abuse. That's a problem that a person has in them already. But we superimpose things on people, and then that changes them. And I've seen that happen in different spiritual communities over the years. And so I think we need to protect ourselves as practitioners and as students and as teachers. We need to be wary of that potential in ourselves and to watch out for it. That we don't superimpose stuff on people. We allow them to be. That if we have a red flag about someone, we listen to it. And that for our own selves, we remain honest about what our level is, our level of understanding, of knowledge, of practice, of commitment, of everything. We don't bullshit about that, If we still like punk rock like we do, if we like fashion like I do, if I like whatever I like, I'm going to like it. I'm not going to pretend that I'm otherwise. I'm not going to put on the guise of what I want people to think of me so that I have to, live out some fantasy and superimpose bad stuff on people. So that's one of my takeaways from the past couple of years. It's been a painful process for a lot of people. I'm one of those people. There are many of us, especially the women who were sexually abused. So that's we'll see what happens. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that, Adam.
No, it's really really, it's confusing, isn't it? And I think you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And not knowing and not having to know, that's something, and that's a space, isn't it? That's providing a space.
Or just
concluding on someone else's behalf.
Everyone needs to come to their own conclusion, but I think there has to be, we should never minimize the pain or suffering of someone else. That's the main thing. Like, we should never minimize that, and that always needs to be a part of the conversation. It happens, and it does happen. Okay,
I can't let you go on that note. Well,
thank you.
Thanks for coming. But I always ask these silly questions. You like music. Give me some background on your love of music or fashion, just as a parting note. Something light-hearted, just to say goodbye on. I usually ask someone what their biggest inspiration is and what their guilty pleasure is. What do you have to say on that?
Well, I don't know what my guilty pleasure is.
Music.
That's not a guilty pleasure.
Not really guilty.
Oh, God, no. God, no. Yeah. I love music. I mean, my father and mother both listened to a lot of music when I was growing up. So my earliest musical memories are Simon and Garfunkel and Don McLean, and Bob Dylan. So that's what I remember from, the time this is 1.5, 2 years old. I remember listening to, the Bridge Over Troubled Water record. And the first album my dad ever bought me was American Pie by Don McLean when I was 3. So I have musical memories. And, I remember the first time I heard David live at my friend Peter Hansen's house when I was in 6th grade. And David Bowie live, of course, in Philadelphia. So that sparked my love of Bowie. My friend Nick Cooper, who I went to school with, he introduced me to The Clash and to the Buzzcocks and to X in like 7th grade or so. And I went to my first concert with him. So music has always been a big, big part of my life. As I mentioned in the One Simple Thing book, I wrote that book mainly listening to Nick Cave and David Bowie, This next book I'm writing, I'm mainly listening to Smashing Pumpkins, who I love. I love that band. And there's a couple of their albums which I hadn't really listened to a lot, which have been like my soundtrack. So they're later albums.
You don't listen to it while you're writing, do you? You don't listen to that whilst you're writing.
I do.
You start writing the words. I was trying to write something and someone was playing Dylan outside. I started writing the words.
No, it makes things in my brain click together. Music is interesting because it has this effect of globally firing neurons in the brain, whereas specific types of thinkings or activities are making different specific parts of the brain fire. But music has this effect of having more of a global effect of the signaling of the neurons, which means it opens up more pathways and more connections. Sometimes, and can help to sort of quote unquote rewire the brains in certain ways. So when I listen to music for creativity, that's what happens. I put something on which sparks something in me, and then because of the way the neurons are firing and the information flows are going, my creative capacities for insight into the things I'm writing about expand. And that's what I do. And it's just how my brain works. And so I don't know. I would venture there are a lot of people out there who write about philosophy and science while listening to the Smashing Pumpkins. That's just my venture. I'd love to meet them. The punk rock movement, right? If you were a punk rocker in the 80s or 70s in England, that was highly about fashion. I mean, it took hours to get our hair just right and to dye it the right color and to stud our leather jackets. So that's always been something. Maybe it's coming from New York. I don't know. But those two things have always been, they're things I enjoy. I like creativity. And I prefer to think of it not as fashion, but as aesthetics. I like design. Any nicely designed thing, I enjoy and have an appreciation of. But as a follower of Sankhya, I take delight in the experience of the world. And the Vedantists, the non-dualists, they might say this world is, illusory. Don't get seduced by it. But in yoga, they say the world exists for two things, experience and liberation. And so I enjoy the experiences of the world. So that's why I don't, it becomes a guilty pleasure when it's an indulgence and it pulls you away from the things you need to be doing or focusing on. You don't have to be guilty about it if it enhances your experience of being an effective human being in the world.
Right. That's a good end note. Thanks.
Hey, Adam, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for letting me blather on. Thank you for giving me the space to talk honestly about how I feel about everything from philosophy to Patabi Joyce to music. And I really appreciate the open nature of our dialogue. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Eddie, for coming. Thank you.